Straight up on 10 o'clock on this Thursday. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Storm Talk. Hello to Brian, Ashley, Allison's in here this morning. I see Wagner. I see you in there. Hello, Amy, Brad, Amy. Teresa, Carrie, I saw you on here first, right on, I think you were one of the first on the YouTube. How's everybody doing? Almost to the end of the week. This week seems really long. I think with school being involved here, it seems even longer. So interesting having the first day of school on a Thursday. At least you get the bugs worked out, and then you get a weekend. Just hope you don't get homework on first weekend like that. And then you regroup again for next week. Hello, everyone. I am with meteorologist Brian Good. We do have a lot to cover and a limited amount of time, but today is a little different. I decided to give you guys a little bit more of a nugget today because I love you all, and you're my friends. At least most of you are. And I'm going to reward you here today by giving just a little bit of a hint, a little bit more than I normally would. And this is very out of character for me to do this, but a little bit more of a nugget on the winter setup. Because it's getting a lot of attention. Just in the last 24 hours alone, a lot of data came out, and I will at least discuss some early thoughts on it, and then I'm not going to be saying anything else about it until Halloween. So this is rare for me to go into as much detail as I'm about to do. And again, that'll be after I get through some other issues we got to get through first, but we will cover some of that here on the blog today because also in addition to that, I will be out tomorrow. I'll be back on Monday, so I thought I'd give you all as much as I can on a Thursday here. Fair enough? All right, so stay tuned if you want to know more about that. Some of you just want to hear all about that and only, and nothing else. But hang tight. I like to go in close to as chronological order as I possibly can here, just to keep it simple. Today is our day of transitioning from the sunnier, quiet days we've had as of late, now getting back into a stormy mode for us as we evolve into part of the weekend here and especially next week. 80 right now in Louisville, 76 into Fort Knox, 73 in E-Town. We are going to continue to climb, but there appears to be a much more of a stopping point on the rise on the thermometer today because we have an active radar just to our west. All right, so here's a look at the satellite. You can see we've got a hazy sky, partly sunny right now across Indiana and Kentucky. This gets your attention back in the Wabash line of thunderstorms, nothing severe. In fact, if you look carefully, there's a little bit of a outflow, so they are cold pulling out, which means they are now in the process of going through an extreme and rapid weakening that will take place. However, the boundary itself will continue to drift east, and the cloud canopy, which is extensive, is about to just overtake most of us in the area. Those of you a little more east, you'll hold on to the sun a little bit later than other areas. But for most of you watching, we're going to go into the overcast sky here today, and that will shave off a few degrees off the highs at least. And it will taper down some of the fuel for the thunderstorms to react to if we didn't have this feature. So a bit of a change here just in the last 12 hours alone that we've noticed in some of the data. So let me get into the wider view first. You can see this is part of, I guess you would call it an MCS. It really didn't power up to be a major event, but it's got that sagging look to it, indicating the cold pooling that has happened. Anytime, again, you get the outflow that outruns it, that's where your cold air is getting too far away from the source, from the storms, and then they just can't, they really can't go much more east than what you see here. So they just, say another 1 or 2 rows of counties, and it'll just disintegrate. And that process will happen between now and about 1 o'clock today. However, the clouds are the last thing to go in these scenarios, and this is a very large canopy of cirrus clouds above this that are going to just continue to fan right over Indiana and much of central Kentucky, including Louisville, in the coming hours as well. So we'll get the clouds, but we may not get the rain. In fact, I really doubt we'll get much rain at all out of this. But what it will do is right on the edge of where the cloud cover is going to be taking place today, that's where we're going to set up a boundary of differential heating. And this is where you can get new development of thunderstorms. And based on what I'm seeing so far, I think Louisville is fair game for that. There is a chance it may be a little more east than that. Could be a little closer to, say, Shelby County to Franklin County. That may be the line just a little bit more east than what I have drawn here. But somewhere where the edge of the cloud shield, where it stops here today, and then it'll stop and then it'll thin. It'll do the same thing the rain is doing, just a bit delayed. But that is where your afternoon storms, if they're going to form, and I fully expect they will form right on the areas that have been heating up nonstop here this morning and early afternoon versus those that are clouding up right now. So right on the edge of that, that creates a mini front, if you will, and it creates a boundary for storms to feed on. So where that ends up being, I don't know for sure, but that's just an early guesstimate of where I think it'll be, and I think Louisville is fair game to be in that zone. And it'll take another 4 or 5 hours, though, for us to get to a stopping point with that cloud shield to know exactly where that will be. As always, we'll let you know as soon as we see any downpour, especially if they're going to be impacting any of the metro for the afternoon buses today. We'll pass that along. But we're not expecting anything on the severe side, but they do have quite a bit of moisture with it. In fact, a lot of moisture is being transported with this. Few watts, precipitable water, the rainfall rate per hour is about 1.7 to 1.9 that will accompany this batch of moisture, and that's decent. It's not to levels, again, that we had recently with heavy rain events, but it is no doubt high enough to lead to heavy rain. And because everything is slowing down, becoming sluggish, you can get some isolated cases of flash flooding. We had some of that into areas of eastern Kentucky yesterday, not far away from Lexington. So it can happen. So just be aware of that. Lightning is one of the bigger issues, too, we'll have to watch out for. So while we're not expecting anything on the severe side, just typical thunderstorm elements today will get your attention. So we'll be monitoring this hour by hour as we continue on through the afternoon. You see that pocket of higher PWatts, deeper moisture there, again, being carried along with that flow that'll be deposited right over wave country. So thank you, Missouri, for that. That's very nice of you. And that sets the stage for the scattered thunderstorms that will be pretty much on a daily basis. We may be able to squeeze out Monday without any type of storm action. That may be the only day because we're going to get busy here. And yes, I do think we're going to have some alert days that'll have to get issued. Just when, that's the challenge. So, but the pattern certainly supports them. It's just a matter of fine-tuning it. So let me explain. We'll begin with our in-house model. I think actually it's done better than the HER has, to be honest, with this setup so far this week. And in general, it's done pretty good this summer. But it does have at 12:30, it shows the rain continuing to fade out. I think, again, the clouds would be a little bit more east than what you see there on the model itself. But this is a fair depiction of where the game plan, the story will be. And you see that it tries to fire up the storms, the edge, the differential heating boundary, very close to Louisville, but mainly between I-65 and I-75 looks to be the spot. And if you get the cloud shield over you quick enough, you'll actually be saved in that sense. You won't have as much to worry about. The clouds will keep the ground from getting out of control on the heating, so that tames down the radar. Basically, another way to word it is rain-cooled air. So that will help you out. But right on the edge of that, that's where the storm chance will be. Those will continue through sunset, and then they will begin to slowly fade out, although it's interesting that the graph, and I believe it was one of the cams I looked at, was trying to do a nocturnal round tonight that may fire up on the same boundary. Because, again, nothing's moving, which is where we get into the isolated cases of flash flooding. The flow is very, very weak. The only reason why this batch here is moving at all is because it got organized into an MCS feature and chugged along. Otherwise, the steering flow is very weak. There's no tailpipe here for these to work around with. So there's forming and staying put. So this boundary, wherever it forms here this afternoon, may very well come back to life during the night tonight. Wouldn't surprise me. Still no tailpipe, even with the nocturnal jet. It's not anything too impressive, but it could feed some heavy rain, some thunder and lightning, even as late as midnight. You may notice it out your window. Don't be shocked if that happens. As we get into tomorrow, notice the boundary setup is a little different. Instead of north and south, lining up a little more with the interstates, as far as the north-south interstates, now it lines up a little more east-west as we head into your Friday. And a little more disorganized, though. Very random, but just about all of the area is at risk for the heating of the day, for these clusters of storms, just like bumper cars. Again, when you don't have a tailpipe, you got to deal with the whole bumper car issue. These could develop and produce some gusty winds in a few cases. Now, the ones tomorrow actually may have enough what we call a downdraft cape to allow for maybe one or two that could get close to severe limits when they collapse, but that's going to be isolated. I don't see anything organized on severe for tomorrow, but certainly a disruption. If you get one of these heavy downpours that pops, you'll know it. Traffic will slow down and for at least an hour until it rains itself out, and then it's over. All right, so this will continue into your Friday night before they fade out, and then Saturday is when we will hold on to storm chance. This model doesn't really show it as much. Let me advance it one more. It shows it relatively tame. I think this is going to be a little bit more active than what you see here, but there's a chance we may get lucky and not have as much action as what Friday. I think Friday is going to exhaust a lot out of the atmosphere. I think Friday could be one of those. We got 40% right now on the chance of rain. There is a chance that could go up to a 70 for tomorrow. Wouldn't surprise me, but it does look active enough, and hopefully we can tame it down a little bit on Saturday. If you have outdoor plans, don't cancel them, but there's still a boundary in the region, so I can't say it's not going to storm. Just don't know if it'll be in your particular location. All right, that gets us in through at least the start of the weekend, which is pretty self-explanatory. Very typical summer pattern, right? Hazy, I wouldn't really say hot, just very, very warm and humid. I guess when you add the humidity in, it feels hot. And daily thunderstorms. Fair enough. Just a little bit different than we've had so far this week. Now, as we get into Sunday, we'll get into a little bit more of the heat dome. We'll try to build back in and try to dominate our weather for Sunday and hopefully on Monday. And while that is happening, it's a different storyline for our friends to the north. You get back into the Midwest, again, just north of I-70, all the way into Pennsylvania. This is going to be the target zone for organized severe weather. SBC, I don't think they do have any outlooks yet for this region, but I think they're coming for all intents and purposes. Based on the jet and placement of this, this is a good candidate for multiple rounds of storms that will form. Meanwhile, we'll have the heat building. You're going to see the Cape get into that gold color over us, but we'll be relatively capped. In other words, the warm air is also above our head. That keeps the radar a little tamer. But remember, these complexes of storms, wherever they do form in the upper Ohio Valley, they love our weather more. They love the heat and humidity. So they will try, each time they form, they will try to build south. And they'll struggle, but they'll make that attempt. And this may happen almost every day as we head into the extended. And eventually, the boundary will keep building down toward our area and then right over us. But each day until that happens, though, they'll make a reach. And if you are more north than you are south, you're going to be more at risk of being exposed to those reaching you than our areas, our friends here to the south will be. So if you're in Indiana, in other words, you'll have a chance that some of these storms could reach you as early in the week, maybe even on Monday. It's possible. Otherwise, if you're down, say, into Adair County in Columbia, you may be left alone until the front gets a little closer. So placement will matter here compared to the upper Ohio Valley. So here is just this is one model's idea. Here's the Euro for Sunday. Here we are into Monday or Sunday night and Monday morning. Again, you can see the complexes that form, and then they try to build each time southbound. The Euro's got a lag to it, so don't pay as much attention to the time. It's got a margin of error here of 6 hours, so it could be evening that you're looking at, not so much 1 a.m. We get the idea, though. There we go into Tuesday. You saw how rapidly, again, they just popped on the radar and then aimed into Pennsylvania, but still struggling to head too far south. But could it be just close enough to get into our Indiana counties and maybe 71? Perhaps it could be. And if they can reach you, they can be strong. So it's worth watching. And this is where it gets to be a problem on declared alert days, because we don't know how long our bubble of heat is going to protect us and keep things tame. We don't know when that will give way. And whenever that does happen, and this may be a situation where we have an alert day that comes out for, say, Wednesday, but we may end up with a severe weather risk that starts to develop Monday night and Tuesday, then we have to back build the alert days from further out in time, build them closer in time. So moving a little bit backwards in how we declare them, if that makes sense, only because we'll likely issue the ones we're more confident in first, and the ones we're iffy on we'll hold off. And as we get more data, we'll fill in on the 10-day, we'll fill the gaps. Does that make sense? Let me know if it doesn't. But that's the easiest way to do it. Aim for the most confident, and then build around it from there. So as we get into Tuesday, shower storms again, upper Midwest. But now we get into Wednesday. Now we're going to start to get this boundary. It will begin to tilt. So overall let me redraw this, sorry. For the start of the weekend here, the boundary is going to be very much east-west, literally Chicago into Cleveland, kind of a fashion. As we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, it will begin to tilt and become a little bit more slanted like this. So roughly around Peoria through Cincinnati into West Virginia. So that will become the new train track for the locomotives to track along. And that will put it much more accessible to wave country when these showers and storms develop. They may not always travel northwest to southeast. They may have the illusion because they love the heat. So they may develop along that zone, but the motion may be more like this. So two different things. They're going to be moving southeast and moving southwest at the same time. So it'll have a weird turning effect that they may have. Not to give them personality, but you get the idea. All right, everyone seems good so far. Type 1 if you're good. Type 1 if you're good. And I'll get to your questions, I promise, coming up at the very end of this section. Because I know it's kind of a lot, and it's not exactly overly complex. This is nothing new. You guys are used to this kind of a setup. It's just been a bit of time here. We've had some quiet weather. We get into Wednesday and Thursday, same ordeal, all the way into Friday. And then I'm being hopeful that we're still going to get the trough to dig into the Ohio Valley by that next weekend to shut things down. I don't know how much cooler it will be, but it will certainly be less humid. And it'll calm the radar down. I'm hoping it'll happen over a weekend. We deserve that. But it all depends on the front. If this does not move fast enough to sink out of our way, then we're going to stay in the storm zone. And yes, there are some pieces of data that hold on to that idea and don't push the refreshing air a little more south. But this has been showing up now for August 16th, 17th-ish for a while. You guys know we've been talking about this since, 4th of July. So the fact that it's still showing up in the models and we're this close now, we're a week away, we could smell it. We're getting closer. That's pretty remarkable. The models have done pretty well on sniffing out these refreshers that move in. They may not be exactly right on the date, but they do always seem to see them, and that's a refreshing sign because I do see more that are coming up down the road. So some good news there. Okay, so let's see. Let me get to the severe risk. This is from CSU. And this is the reason why, again, you're likely to see SPC catch up. I know it's probably hard to read, but here's Saturday's outlook, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Brown is very low end severe risk, or for all intents and purposes, the equivalent to like a marginal risk day. Yellow will be equivalent to a slight risk. And notice, if you can see Kentucky, you see the slant that happens to the front starting here on Sunday. And then it's, just right there, knocking on our door as we head into Monday, just to our north. And then it starts to reach all the way into Kentucky as we get into Tuesday. And then the signal's not as strong, mainly because the front just kind of, fizzles out. Not as much of a dramatic kick to the front, so the severe risk isn't as prevalent. Although I think the Wednesday one may come back and show on a slight as we get closer. So there you go. There is another downside to all this, and you know where I'm going with that. And Angela, I was waiting for you to ask, and maybe I already did. How much rain could we get out of this? Well, obviously dealing with thunderstorms that are repeating themselves, have a lot of moisture content with them, you could get quite a bit. It just depends on how fast does the front slide through. Anywhere in yellow is 2 inches of rain. I think this is obviously underperforming on the reality of it, but you get the trend here is that if it lingers longer, we could be looking at some 4-inch rain totals, especially with this being on a daily basis. So if you are wondering when to mow, someone's been asking that, your grass probably hasn't grown a lot here recently just because we have much in the way of rain. Today won't be a bad day because today you're getting that cloud canopy, so you're going to get some natural shade. So it'll be a little easier to mow without the sun beating down on you here in just a few hours. If you want to wait to get some rain, then mow, you'll have to deal with the heat. I would say Sunday or Monday. After that, you might as well wait. Wait until the refresher arrives after the stormy pattern. Otherwise, you won't have a chance really because it'll be a daily thunderstorm. So you have a couple windows. I would say today is fair, and then maybe Sunday or Monday. So there you go. Dave and Gene, yeah, wind to mow. Today is not a bad day. It will not be as humid as any other period I just listed until the refresher arrives. Then today will be a better feeling day. Any other questions I can try to answer? And I know a lot of you are going to ask on times, and I don't know on timing yet. It's too difficult to pinpoint because they have to form. We have to figure out if there's anything nocturnal. There's a lot of questions to this that get into the specifics of time periods. All I can tell you is that this is the game plan that we're going to be facing, and each day we'll just take it one at a time and see what the status is of what's going on in Illinois and Ohio. And if we know there's storms that they're fighter and they're diving south, we know that they'll start to approach our northern counties. But it may take until Tuesday and Wednesday to get majority of the area in that storm zone. Otherwise, we'll have this little bubble of heat that'll be a separator. Which day, Adam? I mowed Tuesday. Yeah, you may be good. I mean, the grass isn't really growing a lot. And the sun angle has started to do its lovely reversal. All right, so it's starting to get lower now. Hello, fall. So as we start to get a lower sun angle, the grass is not as excited to spike as it is in the early parts of summer. It starts to ease down just a little bit, which is good. Then we get into ragweed season. High school football. Yeah, good point on that. Let's hope we get that refreshing air by the time we get into a lot of the practices for the games. Every year, I feel like we have to deal with that, especially as we get into touchdown Friday night. We have to start watching for the heat index. This may be a bit of a different year, though. I'm hoping this may play out, and it may not be as big of a concern as before. The meteor shower, the Perseids, Olivia, she's asking about that. I mean, they start this weekend. The peak is going to be Wednesday. You'll start to see a few. I think you have an opportunity more so this weekend than you may for the peak. Only because the front's going to be down here at that point for the peak. So that may be tougher to really get a good show. You don't need a telescope. You're just looking really in any direction before dawn. But that's the peak of it. But there will be a few this weekend. So you may get lucky. Whether it's Saturday or Sunday, you may get lucky and get a few sighted there. Wouldn't surprise me. Perseids are sometimes a little harder to see, especially in the little area. You have to kind of be away from the city lights there. But good question, Olivia. Thank you for asking. Okay, I didn't get to the 10-day because I will in a second. I want to cover real quick on the data that came out regarding El Nino. Because there's been a lot of talk about this being, super El Nino. A lot of meteorologists disagree. There's no such thing. It's strong El Nino. It doesn't matter. You guys know how catchphrases are, whether it's the Polar Vortex or the Pineapple Express. The media, and I work in the media, but the media loves the catchphrases. I get it. I told you guys at the beginning of spring, really, that this was going to be a big media topic this year. And I don't think you've quite heard enough about it yet. It's loud in the weather community, but in the general newscast and the public, this is going to be a big, big topic in the coming months. You're going to be so sick of hearing about El Nino. Just throwing it out there now. It's coming, and it is going to make headlines. Everyone's going to be doing memes about it. It's coming. Because the peak of it is not really until we get to Christmas, which is where El Nino comes into play for the baby or Christ baby, because it's near Christmas that it tends to max out. So we've got a few months before it really shows itself, but it's already to the point of getting to be an oppressive level. And if you guys remember, there is a scale that we can go by on measuring the ocean, which is the zone that we're mainly focused on, is located just west of Central America, but a scale positive or negative from 0. You get into the negative, it is the opposite of El Nino. It's a La Nina, which we've had for several years here. We haven't had an El Nino in a while. Positive being obviously El Nino, but the more you go up the scale, the more intense the El Nino can be. Well, this is the latest Euro run that came out. And it's got a peak as you get again. Here's the time frame. Here's December. It gets to a peak roughly here, which I would say is pretty close. I'm not drawing it straight, sorry. Pretty close to a 4. You're like, okay, so what does that mean? Well, most of our El Ninos we've had have been about, I would say, about a 1.5. You get to a 2, you get to strong level, is the category for a strong El Nino, is when you hit a 2. In 1997, the strongest in modern times that we've had on record, 1997, I think I said it right. I don't know if I said 92, sorry. 1997, the strongest in modern times was roughly about a 2.7 to a 3, somewhere in that range. It's kind of fluctuating a bit. But that's the most recent one that we've had since records have been kept, which is roughly 1950. That's not a long time on records. We know the Earth has been around a lot longer than that, excuse me, and we know we've had many El Ninos before that. But as far as modern times go, 97, 98 is the benchmark that we've been going by. We do have hints, though, that in 1877, while we didn't have a lot of weather records at that time, we do know that something catastrophic happened to the globe in 1877 that led to nearly 4% of the world's population being wiped out. Now, granted, it was 1877. A lot of that probably had to do with access to healthcare and technology. I don't know if we would have had the same result, but it was devastating impacts from Bangladesh to flooding there to drought and famine all the way across Africa. That one was estimated to be about a 3.5. And that's an undocumented strongest El Nino. But right now, the data is coming in at a 4. So obviously it doesn't take a genius to figure out here that this will put us into unprecedented territory. We don't know exactly how this is all going to play out as far as how bad can this get. We know what El Nino can do to the weather patterns just in general for North America, and I'll show you that in a second. And the data is certainly screaming a typical El Nino look to the weather pattern. But with it being potentially a 4, then that means that we could see those impacts just go several notches higher in the drama category. And that is where we could get into a much more of a devastating impact. But there's a lot of unknowns here, so we got to go with this carefully. We don't want to get too worked up and, you know, doom and gloom is on the way, nothing like that. I think it's just it's an exciting time for meteorologists and climatologists that are clashing together here with this event, because this is something that we're probably going to use as a benchmark for a long time. And there's several issues here with this. Not only will this have impacts on our weather for this winter, but to get a strong El Nino to this level, one thing we did notice is every time we've attempted to see this kind of a rise before, we have seen the opposite happen the very next winter after that, which is a dramatic La Nina. So this could actually collapse for 2028. I know it's a long way off, but it's a dramatic bending, like pulling on the rubber band, a dramatic bending that happens and then it snaps back. And then we end up with 2 seasons potentially with dramatic winters, and perhaps in 2 different ways. So there's no doubt that based on the data we're looking at, the next 2 winters that are coming our way are going to be far from boring. Now, could be boring here, I'll be honest, but as far as in general, the weather and the climate is going to be quite alive. So there's a lot to learn here from this. And for you students out there right now that are in school studying meteorology or climatology, this is something that I would pay careful attention to. I would be documenting everything you're seeing now, modeling, learn from this, observe, document, and compare the results at the end. That is the best thing you can do that any textbook is going to teach you, is by observing the weather. And this is going to be a perfect example of what it means for not only our forecasting ability, but for our infrastructure. How have we changed? Even since 97, things have changed in the world, right? That's a few decades now, and it wasn't to this level. So there's a lot of interesting aspects to this that we're going to be talking about in the coming weeks. All right, enough on that boring stuff. What does this mean on the weather side? Well, this particular model, if we're going with this idea, it is saying, and this is looking at North America, and I did highlight in the box wave country. So this is the United States right here. It is indicating by the time we get into the winter, colder than normal is showing up for the deep south, for Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, and even part of Kentucky. And you're thinking, oh, well, that's interesting. Great. That means Florida's going to get all these big snowstorms, right? Not necessarily. Again, this is colder than normal. They're already quite warm in the deep south in the wintertime. So colder than normal actually will just get them to the point of getting some wintry weather involved. But it could also mean they could be facing quite a bit of severe weather this year. And that's what I fear is going to be a pretty active tornado setup for the deep south, the I-10 corridor, and maybe even parts of Tennessee Valley. We'll see. The problem I see here with us when it comes to looking at this map and thinking, oh, we're going to get a lot of snow, not necessarily, because here's the biggest issue that should stand out to you is look at Canada. Look how they just blowtorch across Canada. The warm air is overwhelming. This is where you're going to hear about the Pineapple Express hitting Canada. And my worry on that is that this, when you get into cold attacks, the polar vortex in the wintertime, you got to have a source region to get that cold air. You got to have a snowpack. And remember, snowpack is so crucial to get the wind off of that to get us into the bigger events. Our source region may be absent of a snowpack, or at least a decent one. So that's going to work against us. So what we may get is a lot of dry air that flows in from the north. But it only has to be, it just would prevent your cold Arctic outbreaks. This is not the kind of a pattern that features, 25 below zero over much of the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley even. It's not a pattern for that. But it does get you just cold enough that it could get interesting on wintry weather. And something we haven't faced much of in recent years is ice. This could be more of an ice issue, we'll see. But as I've always said, you only need to get cold enough to get exciting. Just get down to the lower 30s and you've got one heck of a winter. You don't need 15 degrees with a wind chill of 25 below. That is where it gets cold and boring because you get nothing but flurries and clippers and snow lovers, bots fans are upset. So when you look at the precipitation, you can see that first off, what it does to California. This is going to be one of the bigger issues for El Nino, what it does to California. I mean, that is going to be a tremendous amount of rain hitting the West Coast. And then the subtropical jet continues across the deep south. This is going to feed a lot of nor'easters. I think the big cities may have some excitement this year for nor'easters and maybe one or two big snows. Can we get a big snow here? Well, I haven't done the winter forecast yet. All right, I'm just giving you early thoughts. Last time we had El Nino, we were able to get a big snow. I'm talking about a 20-plus event, 20-inch plus event that happened, but that was pretty much it. And I think that's how the storyline may play for the winter, as much of the winter may be quiet. I have a feeling that Christmas and December may be quite warm. Winter will likely lag. February is standing out as the month to watch for this year. But it's still early. I just at least want to give you some thoughts on it. We're going to be pouring over all this data over the coming weeks. Officially start the forecast, actually working on it September 1st, so it's a few weeks away. And then Halloween night, we'll come out with the results of our data. We still have another round of this data is coming in September, so, and actually even in October. So I get 2 more rounds of this to come in and to see, does this hold in the outlook? Does that level 4 idea still hold? Does that change? That will all determine the ultimate outcome in the forecast, but I want to give you, if you're hearing talk about it, what the talk is all about. A little bit of the behind the scenes of why it is significant. Type 3, if that all made sense. Type 4, if it made sense, but you really don't care. Some of you, I get it. It's exciting. It's fascinating. And I think for those that are into the meteorology, climatology scale here on this, it's going to be a lot to learn. So it may, again, be boring here for part of the winter, but there will be pieces that could stand out. And usually for snow lovers, that's all you're asking for. You're wanting just one big snow that you can, you know, build your igloos and have about a week of snow days, and then you're fine. Usually it's the way it goes here anyway. I personally, in December, I love a lot of the mini snows. I loved last December. I thought it was great for the holiday season. I love that. I love just enough to keep it on the ground, but it can still get around. You're not disruptive, but it's still pretty all the time with all the decor. I like that. I don't mind the big snows, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, the big snows usually mean that we're all camped out in a hotel here. So not exactly fun all the time on that idea. All right, so that's your, oh great, my system just locked up on me. Of course it did. Hold on one second. As I look at some of your questions, let's see. Incredibly interesting to learn. Thank you, Ms. Turtle. Hang tight. We'll see how it goes. How it goes. Should I go and get my bread and milk? Unless you're out. You may be out. I'm actually out. I need to go get some. 3 question mark. That's fair. I like the 3 question mark. All right. That should be interesting, guys. It should be interesting. I don't think it's going to be anything to worry about in the short term, but I think it's already happening. El Nino is happening, so it's inevitable. I mean, it's not an issue. We may get El Nino. We're going to have El Nino because it's already happening. Now we just got to figure out how bad of El Nino are we talking about. And that is where things get a little weird. Okay, there's your 10-day. We're going to go with a little bubble of warmth. You see that Sunday and Monday that is sticking out for any type of dry time. That will likely be your best time periods. Other than that, your stormy pattern kicks in probably late Tuesday, and these chances probably will go up from what you see here. Just FYI, we're going to keep it kind of modest on the 40% idea. If there's any short-term change, it would be probably tomorrow's could go higher than 40. I don't think right now, Saturday, it needs to go up, but tomorrow may have to. And we'll just take it one step at a time on the alert day potential that could come into play. But again, I'm not ruling out, especially next week, that we're going to have to issue something on that. All right, guys, thanks for watching and listening to me rant. This is kind of a long blog today, but again, you don't have to listen to me rant tomorrow. So you guys have a good weekend. I will see you all coming up on Monday, and we're going to have a busy week together next week. So looking forward to hanging out with you all. So we'll see how it trends. Take care, everybody. I'll see you on midday at 11 a.m.